Hampton West was an illiterate teenager when he joined the 18th North Carolina Infantry Regiment at the beginning of the Civil War. It was men from Ham's company that accidentally killed General Stonewall Jackson in the dark at Chancellorsville before most of them ended up getting killed themselves in Pickett's charge at Gettysburg. Taking a shell fragment in the face and starving behind the breastworks at Petersburg jaded the 20-year-old North Carolinian enough to desert his unit. Moving north after the war, West settled on some soggy land near Salathiel Fisher's estate in Hamilton County, becoming a well-known figure in the new town of Fisher's Switch for his prickly attitude. Poor drainage in this area of Hamilton County earned this town a reputation for being a soggy mess, and soon the new town became to be known as Mudsock. Being a town known for its mud in a time before paved roads attracted a few residents to the sock that were a bit too unsavory to live anywhere else around. Its proximity to the rail line and the lack of an ordinance banning the sale of alcohol led to a constant transient, drunk population moving into and out of the new town. Soon there were two competing saloons operating across the railroad from one another. The first bar, owned by Hampton West, was built on even softer ground than the rest of town and had to be built on stilts. Furnished with a bar, pool, poker tables, and a few chairs where patrons could enjoy some cheap whiskey, and we're talking a lot of cheap whiskey. The amount of whiskey the average American was drinking in the late 19th century would have Don Draper looking like Pinocchio. Hamp's Saloon was the host of several regulars and patrons that could often be seen slipping down the steps outside and into the muddy street. Across the rail line was a rival bar, owned by a pair of Irish immigrant brothers named Edward and Andrew Farrell. And here another set of regulars spent their days talking shit to the patrons of Hamp's bar and also drinking a lot of cheap whiskey. And regulars of one establishment were known to insult and instigate the other saloon and its respective patrons, leading to some open hostility between one another. Consequently, around noon on Saturday, November 19, 1881, a small scuffle took place in the street between a local boy named Barney Renier and a transient known only as Dutch Joe. Over just as quickly as it began, the source of the beef was soon determined to be Hampton West Saloon, and its tale spread quickly through the small town. A few hours after the initial row, a patron of Hampton West Saloon named George McCoy was insulted enough to walk down the street to the Farrell Brothers bar. He was ready to give those instigators a piece of his mind. Outnumbered, he was humiliated and thrown back out onto the muddy street. And scurrying back to West's bar, McCoy told tale of how he bravely stood up to the bullies, and soon a half a dozen or so patrons of West's bar were walking down to confront the other saloon. Walking into the other saloon, Hamp's party quickly realized they were even more outnumbered than before. Facing them was a bear of a man named Ben Fouch, a disgraced former Marion County Sheriff's deputy, Henry Justice, and the Lynn brothers, Adam, Daniel, and Wesley. McCoy attacked Adam Lynn and a negligent bar brawl ensued. Bottles broke as bodies crashed all over bar tables. Hamp was pounced upon by Ben Fouch, who punched West in the face with his brass knuckles, forcing him to cower under the billiards table. The affray quieted as the Farrell brothers were able to parley with the trapped Hamp. They promised safe passage out if he would leave their bar, and Hamp obliged, eager to remove himself from the hostile situation. But as he was rising from under the pool table, Fouch struck him again and kicked him while he was down. Fleeing out into the street, he cleaned his jelly face in the nearby pond before taking a roundabout path back to his saloon, hoping to avoid any further wrath from the Farrell bar. And while Hamp licked his wounds, the patrons of the Farrell bar were riding the high of victory. Henry Justice, possibly unseriously, proposed that the victorious crew take one last drink at Hampton West Saloon before going home, and before anybody could object, the group was in the street moving across the tracks towards West's bar. Busting through the doors, the Farrell patrons were definitely feeling themselves. Fouch confidently walked up to the bar where his previous victim was avoiding eye contact, his brass knuckles still in hand. Towering over Hamp, Fouch slammed his brass knuckles down on the bar and bellowed for all to hear, "I am the best damned man in Mudsock, and I can whip any son of a bitch in it." Not feeling another ass-kicking, Hamp agreed with Fouch and began pouring him another drink. Bob Dawson snuck up behind Daniel Lynn and threw his arm around the unsuspecting man's neck. Provoking a fight once again, Dawson taunted Lynn by whispering into his ear, "My dear boy, I knew your mother, and I'm gonna kiss you for her." Noticing the knife in Dawson's hand, Lynn tried to wrestle himself free from Dawson's grasp, getting slashed in the face in the process. And right on cue, another all-hands bar brawl commences. Fouch runs over from the bar and punches Dawson to the floor again. Quickly, bottles begin flying and pool balls become missiles. Men are beating each other with pool cues as a melody of glass bottles break over grown men's heads. Men, bloodied or not, began to crash out of the small building from whatever exit they could find or make. Fouch was kicking Dawson on the ground before Wesley Lynn pulls him away from the cowering man. And as Lynn was pulling Fouch away, Hamp acquired a bronze beer pulling handle and bopped the burly Fouch on the head, causing him to fall immediately. Fleeing back to the respective bar, the Farrell patrons were chased by several remaining customers of Hamp. Taking out their anger on their perceived rivals, looters began to descend on the Farrell brothers, who were confined within their saloon. Hayworth and Perkins descended upon a cornered Andy Farrell, but luckily he had that thing on him and soon gunshots echoed out in the muddy town. The besiegers fled, luckily free of any holes, and the Farrell brothers took this opportunity to get the hell out of Mudsock. "Come back for Fouch! Somebody's killed him!" an anonymous voice yells out. Answering the call, Wesley Lynn returns and drags the still-alive Ben Fouch next door to Tucker's drugstore, and ultimately to the Red Wine boarding house, where he would die that night. The same night the Farrell brothers' saloon burned to the ground, possibly from their stove being left on in their hasty exit, or probably from an arson attack. After news of a death spreads, a party of lawmen from Noblesville would arrive over the next 2 days to investigate. Central in the investigation is Noblesville attorney William Rooker, a genial man that had a history with Hampton West, teaching the Southerner how to read in the 5 years prior. The posse investigated over the following week and collected stories from the participating sides and parties. Piecing together the tangled stories, an image of an alcohol-fueled sequence of events and slights came clear. But the deeds of Fouch towards Hamp prior to the killing and the damage to Hamp's face gave Rooker and the sheriff enough information to act. Gathering a grand jury on the 3rd of December, 18 indictments would be given out to those connected, except for Hampton West, who it was thought bonked Ben with the big bronze beer handle in self-defense. News of the bizarre fight in Hamilton County soon spread around the state and America, still gripped by the story of the gunfight at the OK Corral a month prior, even reaching the New York Times. But neither bar would reopen after November 19th, as Fisher's switch reputation as a lawless booze hole circulated. Already majorly against alcohol consumption, the populace of Hamilton County responded by taking a violent attitude towards what they saw as an existential threat to civilized peace. In Westfield, a bar outside of town was destroyed by a Quaker mob and its rubble set ablaze. In Noblesville, an alleged brothel was burnt to the ground by locals. The disappearance of both bars from the new town put an end to Fisher's wild era, as the town would remain a sleepy farm town through the end of the 20th century. Hamp, narrowly escaping prison by the hair of his chinny chin, remained in Fisher's as a private citizen, where he continued his beef with the Lynn brothers. He was arrested while attempting to snitch on some business partners that sold him bad counterfeit money. But soon he made a living by a more ghastly practice. Hamp teamed up with an Indianapolis bartender slash preacher slash Abraham Lincoln impersonator, Rufus Cantrell, to rob newly dug graves to sell fresh corpses, including Cantrell's niece. But the relationship would ultimately sour, and Cantrell would snitch on Hamp to the police when he himself was arrested. Karma had ultimately caught up to Hampton West, where Pickett's charged or Ben Fouch couldn't, and he was sentenced to Indiana State Prison, where he died of stomach cancer in 1904. Today, Fishers has grown in one of Indiana's fastest growing cities in the last 140 years, with a population well over 100,000 and growing. Home to both Fishers and Hamilton Southeastern high schools, any meeting of the rivals on the football or basketball court is still called the Battle of Mudsock to this day, as an homage to Hamp and the Farrell brothers' affray. And it's still possible to get stuck on the streets of Fishers today for yourself, as it's a great place to go if you ever want to get stuck in traffic.